Welcome to the programme. I'm Nima Abuarte. The name Godolphin is synonymous with Dubai. It's the world's biggest, richest racing stable, producing champion racehorses and making its owner, Dubai's ruler, one of the sport's most influential people. But a doping scandal at Godolphin has rocked the sport and the emirate. So will its reputation recover?
Suddenly, you're hit by a doping scandal, a bit like Lance Armstrong in cycling. You do simply go from heroes to zeros.
Also coming up this week, pick of the crop. We meet the Turkish farmers looking to grow their bargaining power. Rooms for improvement. How are hotels taking advantage of Arab uprisings? And premier passions. Why are Bollywood films getting their first screenings here in the Gulf? But first, to the doping scandal at Dubai's Godolphin stables, where 11 of its racehorses were found to have been given banned anabolic steroids. It's been described as the worst crisis to hit the sport in years. And while Godolphin's reaction has been swift, what damage has this done to the reputation of the business, Dubai, and its ruler, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum? Simon Atkinson takes a look.
Clouds looming over Dubai aren't a common sight. But in this patch of green, it feels very appropriate right now.
This is the home of the Godolphin stable, perhaps the pinnacle of Dubai's sporting ambition. It's produced dozens of champion racehorses and delivered plenty of prestige for its owner. But the events of the past couple of weeks mean it's not just the signage that's beginning to fade.
Headlines from around the world have devastated Godolphin's image, with a story that's gone well beyond the sports pages. And it's emerged this week that the banned steroids, which can improve a horse's performance, were brought to Godolphin's UK stables from Dubai. The blame's been pinned firmly on this man, head trainer Mahmoud Al-Zaruni, who's admitted supplying the drugs and ordering them to be given to the horses. A rapidly held hearing by British racing authorities dismissed claims he'd simply made a mistake. His 8-year ban's likely to end his career. But for Dubai's ruler, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, it's perhaps worse. While nobody suggests he knew about the doping, he's the face and the money behind Godolphin, bankrolling British racing and using it to put himself and Dubai at the centre of attention.
Sheikh Mohammed has gone on record and said he's appalled by what's happened, because it's not only rocked racing, it's brought him and the region into shame. And you can't deny that. Now, he says he's got nothing to do with it and he didn't know about it, and I believe him. He's an honourable man and he wouldn't want to win through any form of cheating. But nonetheless, when you have the best racing facility around and you've pumped millions into it and you've got world-class horses and jockeys, and then suddenly you're hit by a doping scandal, a bit like Lance Armstrong in cycling, you do simply go from heroes to zeros.
Since the scandal broke, Godolphin's locked down its stables and pledged a full investigation. But getting it talked about for success on the racetrack rather than activities off it will be hard going.
Big brands tend to take the biggest knocks because people lose trust. So right now there's a trust issue. The real responsibility needs to rest with Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed and the Godolphin stable and the brand, rather than necessarily being one person. And I think that that's the challenge, is that people really don't think it's just one person, that it must be, it's more than that. I think there's a suspicion that there's more than that. Sheikh Mohammed and the Godolphin stable need to become a lot more visible in providing information on the audits and the proactive steps they're taking to ensure that this is weeded out, never happens again. And in addition to that, potentially even playing a role in making sure that the industry is cleaned out of foul play.
Now here is another reason why Dubai wants to rebuild its racing reputation. The Meydan racetrack costs more than $1 billion to build and can hold up to 120,000 people. Mind you, they only get close to that once a year for the Dubai World Cup, held every March, the world's richest race, and one that's been won by Godolphin-trained horses 5 times.
Racing is superb in terms of exposure. It will generate interest. It will also provide tourism, but it does come at a very hefty price. But it's a price that Sheikh Mohammed, as the ruler of Dubai, thinks is well worth paying. To allow the Godolphin stable and Dubai to be on the map and talked about, both in and outside of racing.
Racing can't and won't forget about this scandal quickly. Many in the industry have told me they fear this is just the tip of the iceberg and that more allegations will emerge. And if they include revelations about Godolphin, then the stable, Dubai and racing are in for an even rougher ride.
Simon Atkinson reporting there. Now, governments making policies to improve economies and living standards need to base them on accurate information. In this part of the world, that data isn't always available or reliable, and so Arab leaders want to form Arab Stat, a body to coordinate and improve the quality of data coming out from this region. Economists like Khadija Haq from Emirates NBD rely on facts and figures every day. So how big a problem is this?
In this region, every country produces its own statistics, but they don't always produce them in the same way. It sometimes takes them quite a long time to produce those statistics. So by the time they come out, they're not that relevant anymore.
And we're talking about very basic things like GDP.
GDP is one of the big issues in the region in terms of trying to get the data, particularly for the non-oil sectors of the economies, and then trying to collate them in a sensible, transparent way, and then coming up with an estimate. So it's done in different ways, the surveys are done differently, the methodologies are quite different across the region. So when you're comparing GDP statistics from one country to another, you're not necessarily comparing like with like.
Now, there's been a lot of talk for many years about economic integration across the GCC especially, but across the region as a whole as well. What's to say that this is going to happen?
I think the fact that they have announced this initiative is a huge positive because it shows a recognition on the part of policymakers that they do need better quality data on which to base their policies. And if they want to attract investment, they need to be able to provide data to investors so that they can make an informed decision about where they're putting their money, where they want to invest in terms of setting up new businesses and attracting new capital.
So what about your job as an analyst? How do you go about it?
We use what we can when it's available from the official bureaus. The problem that we have is that there's normally quite a big time lag between when we want the data and when it's actually available. So we tend to use proxies to try and estimate what those figures are well ahead of the actual release of them. Different countries have different standards. Some countries in North Africa, because they are reliant on international funding, have to provide more timely data, whereas the GCC hasn't actually relied on international capital markets for funding. So there's not been a huge need on their part to provide this kind of data very regularly.
Which is your favourite country to deal with?
Saudi Arabia has really good statistics.
And your least favourite?
I can't pick out one in particular. They all have shortcomings in certain areas. And that's why ArabStat would be a huge improvement once it's off the ground and once it's able to pull together all the data from the different countries and harmonise it. It would make things a lot easier for us to analyse.
Khadija Haq of Emirates NBD speaking to me earlier. To Turkey now, where agriculture employs a quarter of the population, it makes up less than 10% of the country's economy. Now this means that for all its vast output of cereals, nuts and fruits, most Turkish farmers struggle. Now there are those that believe that these small businesses can get a bigger share of the rewards. Jeremy Howell went to Malatya in southeast Turkey to find out more.
Springtime in Malatya, and the apricot fruit is beginning to appear on the trees. This is the key crop of this region. Malatya apricots are sold throughout Turkey and throughout Europe. On this farm, the fruit is grown and then packed for a national chain of fruit stores, Malatya Bazaar, the farm's main customer. But last year was a bad one for the growers. Too many apricots were produced and too few bought, and the farmers here ended up making big losses.
The
main problem is price instability. We can never tell what the price will be in the following year and plan accordingly. The price swings wildly depending on supply. Last year, supply was very high and prices fell by 200%. For farmers, this was a catastrophe, and some of them lost all they had.
Farmers generally have to sell their crops to the corporate buyers as soon as they've been picked, so they can pay wages and buy material for the next year. They're in a weak position to bargain over price. The buyers, on the other hand, can store the crops for resale when prices are highest. Tevsi Çiçek from the local Institute of Agricultural Engineers has come with news of a new government measure which helps farmers set up their own storage facilities and gives them bridging loans so they can sell their crops when they like.
When supply is high and their costs are high, farmers need to sell all their produce at once. If they had a storage system, then they could wait until prices increase, and that would bring stability to the system. The best method for this is what's called a licensed storage system, for which a law was passed recently. Farmers can store their own produce, and it acts as collateral for them to get credit from the banks to cover their expenses. This means farmers won't have to sell their produce all at once.
This would work only if farmers' cooperatives were developed. Then farmers would be stronger. In Europe, all sectors of farming have their sales cooperatives. We don't have that in Turkey, so there's no mechanism for farmers to sell their own produce. Of course, if this happened, farmers could set their own prices, and there'd be major players in the market.
The first steps then are setting up storage facilities on farms and organising farmers' unions or cooperatives to control when crops are put on the market. This will put more money in farmers' pockets to plough back into their farms to make them more productive. But those at the top end of the agricultural commodities sector are thinking far beyond this. At the moment, most Turkish farmers sell only to local buyers, and they have to take almost any price set for them. What difference would it make if those farmers were free to scour the world, seeking out markets abroad, where the demand and the price of their produce were higher? Well, that's the idea behind the proposed new Turkish agricultural exchange.
Turkey is indeed the 7th largest agricultural producer in the world. That means that we have access to most of the physical product here. And I think, in Turkey, if the products were traded on the commodity exchange, then because we would have access to most of the physical product and the information about the quality of that physical product and when that product will be ready, then we will control the market. That's how it works.
I might be cynical, but it strikes me that the people who would get very rich from this would be the commodity traders. The farmers might get a little bit richer, but the people who'd really make a killing are the commodity traders.
Of course, there is a margin to be made when you're trading. It always is. There has to be, because the trader ultimately is taking a risk on the physical delivery of the product. The farmer is going to be able to know when they can produce something, how much they can produce it for. So the farmer is indeed going to be better, but I think it's all about setting the whole system correctly.
Farming employs a quarter of the Turkish population, yet adds less than a tenth to national income. The government spends over $7 billion a year subsidising farmers, essentially as a safety net for those who must scratch their living from the soil. What the commodity traders suggest is to transform the sector into an international business, promising a leap in incomes which would take farmers beyond the need for government handouts.
Jeremy Howell reporting from Turkey there. Right, we're going to take a short break now. And when we come back, Bollywood balmy. We find out why the Middle East is so in love with Indian cinema. Welcome back to the programme. I'm Nima Abuarte. Now, the unrest across this region has had a big effect on business travel and tourism. Places like Dubai continue to boom as people come here for meetings, holidays and conferences. But places like Egypt, on the other hand, continue to suffer, and they rely heavily on tourism. Now, no one sees these trends more clearly than hotels, and I caught up with the chief executive of the Starwood Group, Frits van Paschen, and asked him how his business is faring here.
Well, clearly this is a region where there are different dynamics playing out in different markets. Syria is pretty much off the map right now, as you can imagine, but Lebanon is an interesting market, and we're looking at opportunities to grow there in spite of its proximity to the conflict in Syria. We're seeing business come back to the resorts in Egypt, more than in Cairo, for example, but here in the Gulf, business is continuing to boom.
So what's your commitment to people who operate under your brand? If they're going through bad times in a place like Bahrain, a place like Egypt, what help do you provide them?
Well, so what we do is we make sure that we can continue to bring guests in from around the world. If you take our hotel, for example, in Cairo or Sheraton there, the fact that occupancy is down is giving us a great opportunity to work with the owner to do a renovation. Because the opportunity cost is much lower, hotel's not that full, but as demand comes back, which we believe it will, we'll have a hotel that's in great shape, and it'll be an opportunity for both us and our owners.
And if they can't pay?
Well, if an owner really can't pay, and if a hotel is struggling that much, sometimes we will have to walk away. It doesn't happen very often. Usually we find ways to work together. The interesting thing about the hotel business is, unless you have a huge amount of debt on your property, hotels can make money on a relatively low level of occupancy. Now, they're nowhere near as profitable as they can be when they're full, but a hotel is a profitable business almost from the get-go.
So let's talk about a market like Dubai. Over 10 million people came here last year. How is it affecting your business?
We're looking to continue to grow. Even in the worst days of 2009, our average occupancy that year was 82%, which in the hotel business is a great number. We're participating in the growth in this market. We're benefiting from the fact that Emirates Airlines is adding more destinations by the day. That's bringing people from around the world, people who know our brands from other markets, but who are interested in seeing what's going on in Dubai.
So will there be a point when Dubai has too many hotel rooms?
I don't see us anywhere near that today. I mean, theoretically, everywhere is going to get to some point eventually, but the growth here that we see continuing, the expansion of airlift, the greater interest, the creation of more and more destination things to do here, for us means over the long term, there's still a long way for us to continue to grow here.
Frits van Paarden, the chief executive of Starwood, speaking to me earlier. Now let's see what other business stories are making headlines across the region this week. Kuwait's parliamentary committee has told the International Monetary Fund that it can't start imposing taxes on citizens because the quality of its public services isn't good enough. The comments came after the IMF warned Kuwait that it risks exhausting all its oil savings by 2017 if it keeps raising spending at the current rate and should introduce taxation. Income is not taxed in Kuwait, one of the world's richest countries per capita. Workers in both the public and private sectors in Oman have begun having their weekends on a Friday and Saturday instead of Thursday and Friday. Economists say the move will bring huge benefits because businesses could previously only interact with much of the world on 3 days each week. The changes bring Oman into line with other Gulf states, with the exception of Saudi Arabia, which last week said it too was contemplating a change. Egypt says it's still waiting for a $3 billion loan from Qatar, which was promised in early April. Sources involved in negotiations told Reuters that Qatar was seeking a higher interest rate than Egypt had hoped for at around 5%. That compares with an expected 1.1% on a loan that Egypt is negotiating with the International Monetary Fund. Egypt has a major funding crisis and has been asking its neighbours for cheap loans. Now it's 100 years since India's first homemade feature film was released, and that saw the dawn of an industry that's become known as Bollywood. Few moviegoers outside of India are more passionate about these films than people here in the Gulf. Jonathan Frowen finds out more.
This is the Lampsey Cinema in Dubai. Now, it's one of a number of theatres that specialise in showing only Bollywood films. It's Monday evening, which is normally a quiet night at the cinema, but still, they're doing a fairly brisk trade. So what's brought people out tonight?
I come about, say, once in 2 weeks. Probably depends, movies depends on my actors or the actresses who are starring in it, and if the trailers seem impressive, I definitely would come in for the movies.
I'll come for Hindi movies once a week because I love Hindi music, that's why.
Today I'm here to watch Ashiki 2, which is the latest movie from Bollywood, and just to enjoy myself.
One draw for moviegoers here is that films are released a day ahead of those in India, because the weekend starts a day earlier in the Gulf. It gives people here bragging rights compared to their friends back home.
Everyone wants to watch it earlier, no? before watching it in India. So then they can use, now there's a different mode, like Facebook, mails and all. The customer, they can have a gossip as they watch the movie. They can tell their near and dear ones in India to watch.
But it's not just the UAE's estimated 1.75 million Indian expats who are keeping the interest high. Gulf nationals and other Arabic speakers are watching Bollywood movies too, which means strong advertising revenues for firms like Z Television.
بظن انك سمعان باسمي.
Gansha. It has a dedicated Arabic language Bollywood movie channel, and since starting to dub movies into Arabic rather than use subtitles 18 months ago, has more than doubled its viewership.
We've been running one Bollywood film channel. We're in the process of starting another Bollywood film channel for the Arab audience here. We have a third Bollywood film channel for the non-Arab audience. So Bollywood as a genre of entertainment is exceedingly important as far as our network is concerned. The cultural openness of the Arab market is very, very interesting to note. They're very open culturally to a lot of outside influences. And yes, since most of the mainstream general entertainment channels or the Arabic channels are playing Bollywood content, it basically tells you that the pulse of the people is to view Bollywood. So Bollywood as a genre is growing by leaps and bounds.
It's not just on the screen that you see Bollywood stars here. The big names are regularly flown over to promote films and make guest appearances, with events like this proving a massive draw for fans. But while the actors and actresses come here on publicity tours, actually making Bollywood films here has been far less common recently, though there are signs that's changing.
A lot of Bollywood production houses were filming here, and for a long time they were doing that. It was easy to get permissions. After a while, the bureaucracy went up, and there was a lot of changes in the rules and regulations by location permissions, every other thing that fell into the production part of things. When they put all these regulations, it scared these Bollywood production houses away. So the government realized they needed to ease the location permissions and all the other types of permissions, rules and regulations. They had to ease that in order for them to be able to get these companies to come back. Once they did, these Bollywood production houses started showing interest again, and now they're filming here, and it's only growing.
If another of Dubai's ambitious developments ever materialises, there'll eventually be a Bollywood theme park here to tap into the passion and pockets of Indian cinema fans. But even if that doesn't get off the drawing board, there's still plenty of money to be made from popcorn and tickets, as cinemas cater to the love of movies from Mumbai in the Gulf.
Jonathan Fruin reporting there. Well, our time is very nearly up for this week. I hope you've enjoyed our programme. Before we go, let's see how the region's main markets performed. And remember, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is middleeastbiz@bbc.co.uk. And you can go to Twitter and Facebook for latest photos and news from our teams across the world. Now, next week, we're talking travel and tourism as industry figures descend on Dubai for the annual Arabian travel market. Now, last year they were looking for stability across this region, but with that proving elusive, is there anything they can do but wait? Until then, from me, Nima Abu Arde, and the rest of the team, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.